10 or more years now, maybe 12.
Yep.
And we've had the opportunity to be at numerous different retreats together. I've had the opportunity to receive your work, but I would love to just have you talk a little bit more about your background and the work that you do, and specifically in the context of trauma, because there's so much out there now on the internet these days that talks about how physical and emotional trauma can get stored in the body, and that's really kind of at the heart of the work that you do, which is very sensitive work. And you just have such great energy and you create such a great safe space. And so I would love for you to give an introduction of who you are, and then your journey through the process of learning this type of body work and how that's evolved. And then we can talk more about some specifics. How does that sound?
Yes, sounds great.
Okay, super.
Um, yeah, I mean, 10 or a little bit more years ago, I was kind of just starting out as a yoga teacher, but was really engaged in and looking for either a modality and or a tradition with depth. And so I tried over the years, I tried a lot of things, both as a receiver of lots of kinds of body work and energy work, and then also went to some shorter term trainings over time to see what was really for me. And about 6 years ago, I found a particular school and a particular modality that just spoke to and speaks to everything inside of me. And so for the last 3 years, I've been studying full time at a meditation retreat center that also offers training in these therapeutic and healing modalities. And that has been what I've been doing for the last number of years so that I could become a practitioner of this work. And so inner space techniques, what that means is and regression therapy within this context is it's not hypnosis based. So the inner space techniques points to using meditation based techniques to go into the inner world, the inner landscape, the inner space. And from there, allowing things that are inside to rise to the surface. And it's exactly like what you said, as far as people know the terms kind of issues are stored in the tissues, or the book, The Body Keeps the Score. That is absolutely one level of it. It's that our cells, our tissues, our body has essentially memory and stores anything from traumatic events, for sure, as you said, but also any events that have some level of gravitas or gravity in our lives. And so sometimes those can also be really joyful or just really like high anxiety or high excitement times. And so all of that can get stored. And then from there, there's an additional aspect, which is from the perspective of like an energy body model or a subtle body model, which is that some of those imprints actually also live at levels that are not even physical. And so that can be pointed to in something like our energy body. If someone wants to entertain an idea or a philosophy or a cosmology that we have bodies that aren't just our physical body. And so that modality, the inner space techniques, is a way of, through going inside, you can access the body memory side or the somatic side of things. And then you can also access these other energetic places where imprints are also stored that are sometimes harder to get to. And so that's the inner space technique. That's the regression therapy, and the kind of idea or like a main principle of why it's helpful to source or to, work on healing both or all levels of something like trauma or impact.
Yeah, you just said something that was kind of mind blowing to me, because everybody talks about how we store negative emotions and trauma in our body. Nobody ever talks about the fact that we can store like good good events or exciting things in our body either. And I'm like, well, what does that manifest as? And funny that we only ever focus on storing negative things. Nobody ever talks about storing positive things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best example is probably the feelings that we get sometimes when we, for example, travel back to a place from earlier in our life or our childhood, and there's some level of like depth of feeling of memory or
Mhm.
longing for a time in our lives that
Mm.
was simpler, or fill in the blank. And the reason why it's more than just a memory, and I think usually people can relate to this example, is there'll be like this welling up of something like emotion or feeling. And whether it's, being moved to tears or whether it's, gosh, I'm even forgetting the word right now. What's the word when you have um, like a longing for a past moment? Anyways, that's funny that I can't remember the word, but this feeling of like,
Nostalgia?
yes, exactly.
Okay,
That's the
okay.
word.
Yay, I
A
got it.
very strong nostalgia. I have it sometimes when, like, I drive by my high school, and it's like there's
Mm.
no part of me that wants to relive my high school years. And for some reason, when I'm like up on that side of the hill in Bend, Oregon, it's like something in me remembers very strongly, much more than just a memory in my mind, this time of life that was, me in high school. And so that's an example of something that can be stored also.
Yeah, one of the things that, and maybe sometimes we can tell ourselves story, whether those stories are true or not is a totally different conversation, but I feel like sometimes my body has a memory of an event, say that happened, let's just say September 1st or whatever. Something happened September 1st, it was a big deal and it caused me to be very depressed or whatever. And then 3 years go by, and then for some reason, I'm, like, super depressed in September, right? And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, "Oh, as my body just remembering that 3 years ago, like, at this moment in time, I got super depressed," and my body's just kinda remembering that, and it's, like, kinda coming up because now it's the exact same time of year, and so I've had those moments where I've just kinda wondered, is what I'm feeling now actually just some bodily memory of what I was
Mm,
going through years ago that's kind of like my subconscious
totally.
calendar is remembering.
Yeah, I feel like there's multiple levels that are so interesting, but something like seasonal affect disorder, I don't even know
Okay.
if it's a disorder. I think it's honestly our human and animal bodies being like, slow down, like this is not the season to do fill in the blank. But I think there is some level of like our body clock, our natural rhythms, are the way that our ancestors used to live in alignment with, the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars, the seasons. That is a way bigger part or affects us way more than maybe modern day humans either want to admit, and or with all of modern day technology and the fact that, we can have as much light as we want way before the sun comes up and way after the sun comes up. Like we can be very productive outside of the daylight times. I think we're on some level, very basic level, we're overriding some of those rhythms.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then the specific thing of like a date or a specific, month or a specific season, there is a level. I mean, it might be a good time to just introduce something like the fourfold model of subtle bodies. And I think the disclaimer here is this is one model of many models of energy and subtle bodies. So it isn't that it's the only one. It's just a lens through which we can look at things. And so in that model, it's pretty simple. We have a physical body. That's usually pretty obvious to people. We have an etheric body or a body of prana or chi, which is our life force. Those words are sometimes also familiar to people. The third level is we have an emotional/mental body. In this model, it's called the astral body. And then we have a higher self. And the something like these imprints, whether they're quote positive, negative, or neutral, but something big happens and then it's remembered in the physical body at the level of cells, tissues, body memory. We also have sometimes imprints in the astral body and at the emotional, mental level of us. And so the example or like the kind of ancient word to point to there is samskara. It's a Sanskrit word, and it essentially means an emotional or mental scar.
Mm.
And the thing
Different from
about,
samsara, this is samskara.
yes, with a K,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. But interestingly, I mean, you can see how the root might be slightly related because samsara
Mhm.
is this ongoing reincarnation into the cycle of suffering and reincarnation until we become enlightened. And so you can see how samskara
Mm.
could be connected to,
Yeah.
which is we keep getting these samskaras, whether it's just in this life or if someone believes in past lives, we have them from past lives. And then we just reincarnate over and over into bodies that essentially repeat our core samskaras. So we experience these things life after life. Or again, if someone doesn't believe in past lives, in this life, you can use the example of like, well, I just keep dating the same person. They just
Mhm.
kind of look a little bit different, but they basically act the same. So that
And
could
maybe
be an
they have
imprint.
certain right, and maybe they have certain characteristics of one of my parents.
Totally, exactly.
Yeah.
And multiple potentially layers of either small samskaras or big
Mhm,
samskaras from when we were children,
mhm.
for example.
It's kind of that thing of our unconscious tapes that we run kind of run our show. And the bigger the gap is between our conscious understanding of who we are and what we're doing and what we're thinking and the stories we tell ourselves versus our unconscious mind, the bigger that gap is, the more out of control we are in our lives, the more reactive we are versus being proactive and kind of in choosing to be in control of our thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, our words. And so is that part, I mean, I know that you're not doing talk therapy, but I would imagine that there's still this kind of integration piece that you see happen between kind of someone's subconscious and their conscious with the work that
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually a pretty big, it's probably one of the couple of like main pillars or principles of something like this form of regression work, but also is really present in, both Western models of psychology and then also, Eastern or ancient models of spiritual work, which is this principle of deconstruction and de-identification, essentially. And so what you're pointing to are these levels of conditioning that we all have as humans being alive on the planet right now. We'll just keep it pretty simple. If you're a human alive on the planet right now, you have conditioning, period. Even if you don't want to look at it and even if you don't want to admit it, or even if some people don't even, some people love their conditioning, some people want to get free of it and some people are like, I don't even care. So no judgment in any direction.
Mhm.
But essentially this, to some degree, we think we're really free and we actually aren't, which is exactly what you're saying. There's all these subconscious things that are kind of running our decisions in the background. And so when I say deconstruction, what I mean is deconstruction can be at the level of belief systems. So someone grows up in a family and or a religion and or in a country where there's certain belief systems. We all have those. There's levels of values. I like to ask people when I do workshops or when sometimes in one-on-one work, it's like, okay, so you value this, you have these values. It's like, did you choose those or did someone else or did your job give them to you? Do you value it because you have this job? And then why do you have that job? Do you have that job because you grew up in a household that had, a certain amount of chaos and so now you've become a scammer? I mean, this is kind of a funny
Yeah.
example, right? Like their values, our values come from somewhere. Usually they aren't chosen unless we've done some like, intentional work around that. You can deconstruct worldviews. So like the huge big picture of how someone views the world, like that's a pretty big level of conditioning that essentially may or may not be connected to reality. And I mean reality in kind of a capital R sense. If someone's
Right.
interested in getting closer to real reality, it's like deconstruction of those levels has to happen so that the subconscious, exactly like what you're saying, isn't running the show. And I have an example that's similar to the scammer's example, although I'm not a scammer, which is I had a past life regression experience a number of years ago about, being in a woman in whatever era. It maybe doesn't even matter what the story is, but, being victimized kind of over and over, tortured, et cetera, fill in the blank. And I studied in this life, I was super passionate about, I studied women's studies and feminism and was an activist for like most of the early part of my career after leaving my master's degree. And I just saw, like, it's not that women's studies and feminism doesn't matter to me anymore or doesn't matter to a higher part of me, but I could just see, I was like, I was drawn to that particular program, that particular time of my life because I have a samskara from a past life. I was like trying to make it right, trying to create justice,
Mhm.
trying to create equality because I have a samskara around that. And that's just a
Mhm.
crazy thing to see. It's like I didn't make that choice from a place of freedom. And again, it was beautiful and is beautiful. It's still a huge part of my life. But now I've like chosen those values from a slightly different place because I saw the wounded part that also was a part of it.
Okay, so let's talk about the body as a historian. Let's get back to the somatics here.
Cool. Well, so there's in this model that we've sort of introduced in the fourfold model of subtle bodies, there's a little bit of a reversal of causality. And so in particularly a very Western mindset or a Western worldview, causality is usually at the level of either the physical body and or its functions or functionalities. I think in the realm of healing, the nervous system is a big one. It's like we point to the nervous system or some level of dysregulation happening, and then it causes all these other things to happen. And so in something like, again, just offering it up as a lens, in something like the fourfold model of subtle bodies, this would also be true of, like, if someone is familiar with the Vedic system of the koshas, if someone's familiar with, the chakra system, something like this would be relevant, which is that the level of causality is non-physical. And the physical body is actually just a receptor for things that are happening on much, much more subtle levels. So in thinking about some of this, or kind of applying what we're talking about as the body as the historian, the samskara that's in the mental emotional body, the astral body, that imprint is the level that causes other things to then go awry in the physical body, whether it's the nervous system or, issues being stored in the tissues, et cetera, et cetera. So the thing that happens first, let's say, or closer to the source, is the energetic scar or the samskara. And so it's again, I'm not saying that that's the truth, just offering it up as, it's kind of interesting to think about, like, if I'm in a car accident, and obviously your area of extreme, amazing, beautiful expertise that I'm always in awe in is around concussions. It's like, is the thing that happened, the impact down here on the level of the physical body and what happened in the brain? Of course. But also at this other level is the impact somewhere in, I'm pointing up here, even though it's not really dimensionally up here, but at the level of the mental emotional body, closer to the source, or that's the cause. And then all these other kind of things are like trickle down effects. So even though I don't know all of the brain science around, or even close to all the brain science around concussions, it's like, what could someone do? And I know you do this work too, to unwind or help heal or transform the level that is like not on the physical plane at all when someone comes to you for support, or someone comes to me, for a different kind of support.
hmm hmm Yeah, I mean, this might be a little bit different, but I will say that having studied Qigong, having studied Tai Chi, having studied craniosacral therapy and biodynamic craniosacral therapy, sometimes information just kind of comes to me, whether it's true or not, but there's just different impressions that kind of come to me. And there are times when I will have somebody who maybe was just recently in a car accident and they're laying on my table, and there's just kind of this sense of like, this person is not in their body right now. Like, it's just, there's it's like something is not grounded, right?
Yeah.
And what is often beautiful is when you see that shift. And sometimes acupuncture can be the vector for which all of a sudden you're inserting needles into the body, and then the person is just all of a sudden, it's just like they're there, they're back in their body, they're engaging with you, they're present, they're making eye contact, and all of a sudden their personality shines through, and you're like, oh, hi, like, welcome back to your body.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a again, I'll just keep bringing it back to the fourfold model because that's kind of my realm that I play in, or my sandbox. It really points to this. We have just a kind of further divide. We have a lower complex, which is the physical body and the etheric body, so our life force and our physical body down here, and then we have the astral body, mental, emotional, and our higher selves. And in this model, the upper complex, which is the astral body and the ego, and I mean capital E ego, sorry, I wasn't actually going to use that word because it confuses people, but it's the spirit. At night when we dream, for example, that upper complex disconnects a little bit and goes and travels. And that's what sleeping and that's what dreaming is traveling through the astral spheres, which is not physical at all. It's not grounded in physical reality. So what that points to is we have a part of us that can exist independent to a degree from the physical body. So dreaming is one example, traveling at night and dreaming is an example of the upper complex having some space from the lower complex. And trauma is another example of people create or experience, or as a result of the impact or the trauma, that level of separation. And it's true. They might exist for a certain period of weeks, months, or sometimes years without being super connected in the way that like you and I, as grounded people kind of in our bodies right now, they just are existing on some other, in a totally different state. And it is really, really healing to have a practitioner help someone in a really, safe, trauma-informed way, whether it's gentle or sort of like a snapback, but like to help someone navigate that part of themselves back to like reintegrate into the lower complex, essentially. And yes, acupuncture is such a beautiful way, one of many
Well,
ways to do that.
and we have these medical terms where we talk about dissociated states, and yet I think there's like so much more to unpack there in terms of what is that really and what is actually going on. And, in medicine, of course, we make it sound like this very kind of sterile thing, but we talk about dissociatives, right? Whether it's a pharmaceutical or a plant medicine, like there are certain things that are dissociatives, but then there's also people who, like you said, they're walking around in dissociative states and they're not able to really fully integrate what's going on. And so I think there's just so much there that we still don't really fully understand. And
Yeah,
obviously, when we're only looking at it from purely a biological perspective, we're probably missing a lot. And, there have been certain times when I've worked with somebody and they're just not getting better, they're not getting better, they're not getting better, and so it's kind of like, "Well, this isn't working for you." So they go off and then they try something else, and it might be some kind of, like, energy healing, and then they come back to me and they're like, "Oh, well, I went to this person, I did an energy healing session, or I did Reiki, or I did something," and all of a sudden they're, like, 95% better, and I wouldn't have chosen that modality for you as, like, the thing that was gonna turn the corner for you in such a dramatic way, but it did, and it's like, maybe there's, again, a whole lot going on that I just wasn't picking up on from that energy perspective.
totally. I mean, this is really like, okay, if I was going to say one thing that's really powerful about certain kinds of modalities where there's complete mystery, right? It's like there's certain things that at this time in human evolution that and in let's say like spiritual teachings, it's like the ordinary mind will not understand. So I'm just so it's a mystery, but it like
Mhm.
feels like it has some kind of depth or truth, behind it when people say it. And I think this is one of them, which is the that, so let's say it's like, okay, someone's disconnected for any number of reasons. They're upper complex a little bit. They're disassociated is one of the clinical terms for sure, and is a good term. And having a modality that reconnects that, essentially what has occurred is someone has become reconnected to some degree with their highest spirit. And in a lot of these traditions, not just one, but many traditions, the spirit is like the sun. So you imagine the earth, let's say the earth had to go through a period of being further disconnected from the sun than we currently are. Life is hard. Life would be really hard. Like we would struggle. We wouldn't be able to grow food. We ourselves depend on sunlight. And so by bringing someone's sun, essentially like helping someone reconnect with their sun, it essentially like sets back in motion the whole natural ecosystem of how, for mysterious reasons, we ourselves, our bodies, our spirits, our any level of like know how to reorganize around that organizing principle of the sun. So it's like if a practitioner can help someone land back with some level of their spirit, there's a whole bunch of natural healing, let's call it, or like innate healing that people's systems, bodies, minds, spirits just know how to do because they've gone back into orbit with themselves. That's the kind of
Mhm.
a good analogy. And I would say again, like that's almost like at the heart of the work I do, actually. It's hard to lead with that, like, oh, I'm reconnecting someone with their son. But like that's really through a session or a series of session, if even the tiniest little glimpse of someone having me not telling someone they're having that experience, but someone genuinely having an experience of like a moment of glimpsing their own timelessness, for example, like
Right.
themselves at every age in this life, it does way more healing than anything I could ever do to someone, you know? It's like if the space
Mhm.
opens and that happens, it's kind of like one of those little mini miracles, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I often have said when I teach and when I talk, I've made the comment that especially with the people that I work with that have had lingering post-concussion syndrome, many times when there is just really intense emotional trauma and a history of post-traumatic stress, whether it's related to the thing that caused the concussion or not, I just there are certain people where it's like, I can work so hard for that person. I can give them so many different therapies and treatments, and they're just not getting better. They're so stuck.
Mm.
And it's kind of at that point where I'm like, okay, there's something else going on here that you need a different type of modality, whether and it's again, it's like, is that modality somatic work? Is it meditation? Is it breath work? Is it counseling? Is it EMDR? Like there's so many things out there,
Totally.
but there's certainly a lot of times when I just have to step back and say, there's a blockage here, and I'm not the one that wants to go hunting for it, and I don't know what it is, but you need to figure that out in some way, and I feel like either it's through kind of the psychology or the energy work, it's like kind of one of those 2 things that needs to be explored further to figure out what is this block that is preventing somebody from integrating all of the other fabulous therapies that they're undergoing that simply aren't helping them.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely I don't I don't claim to know the answer either. I know you're not asking me for the answer, but what it makes me think of or is this again, it's a little bit of maybe like a mindset or a worldview reframe, which is someone being able to ask themselves something like, on how many levels of my being can I give care and love to this thing that's really hard right now? And so you know, what are the physical things that support me? Usually people have some idea of that. Whether it's eating well or there's some basic like health and wellness things that people can do. And by basic, I don't necessarily mean always easy, but like some foundational things. And then people getting to ask themselves like, well, how could I treat this? How could I address this? How could I give care on the level of my life force body or my psychological, um, mental, emotional body? How could I give what are things like I think sometimes it's also like, what are things that I just love that I don't give myself enough time or permission to do? And
Mm.
that could be something that reconnects someone with just some inherent kind of joy. And that can do a lot as well. It doesn't have to always look like finding 10 practitioners. I know you weren't saying that either, but having 10 practitioners do like 10 different things all at once, sometimes that's not even helpful, anyways. But what are things that are simple, but then people really love? And then, that can set something in motion too.
Can you think of an example of maybe somebody who let's just take someone who has, like, chronic low back pain or some kind of chronic pain, and maybe they've been to all kinds of great therapists. Maybe they've seen chiropractors, and they've done physical therapy, and they were doing acupuncture or massage or whatever. They're doing all these things, and they're not getting better. Have you seen somebody kind of come to you for this type of somatic work and regression therapy and have a significant change in their physical symptom simply by doing this kind of work?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, um, I myself have chronic low back pain. And it's both an ongoing thing that I work with, and it's also something that I've seen a lot of benefits and a lot of transformation essentially. I also have um endometriosis, so my periods have been really really bad, especially for the last 10 years of my life. So some of the things also that I'm about to say have also helped with some of that. Again, it's not gone. I still have instead of having a bad, really, really bad moon cycle every month, I have it like every 3 or 4 months, let's say. So definite
Mhm.
improvement. I'll say something really broad that's not specific to low backs first, which is through an energy body or a subtle body model like this, one of the things that causes a lot of uh, grief is the wrong word because I don't mean emotional grief, but a lot of challenge in a lot of ways for all of us is just some level of really deep grasping. And the grasp is in this fourfold model of subtle bodies. It's so we've talked about when the upper complex someone disassociates, that could be something where the upper complex kind of lifts away from the lower complex. People are walking through life in something akin to kind of like a sleep or a dream state. That's essentially like a good analogy. There's also, as humans alive on the planet in the 21st century, all of us are grasped. Let's just say this isn't specific to any one group of people. But where the lower complex, essentially the astral body, the mental, emotional, squeezes our life force or our etheric body tremendously. And it's essentially like we're all walking around squeezed. And that squeeze manifests differently in different bodies anatomically and manifests in different bodies energetically. And so, what I would say or do with someone who's experiencing chronic low back pain, or maybe even any kind of chronic pain, is I wouldn't necessarily approach it super differently than I would approach anybody, but what we would look for is a somatic way in or a handle into the physical sensation to start, and then look for some kind of source maybe, and that might be one or more sessions of going back in time, so regression meaning like let's not try to go back to the earliest memory in your childhood where you remember this pain, but like let's just go back to like either a couple months ago or maybe a couple years ago where there's a significant memory of this really um like making something in your life really hard, like whatever that might be. And so starting to look back at earlier and earlier times or examples, and then from there start to see if those, like my back used to go out, I would be like completely laid up in bed. So starting to look at like, okay, what was happening in the weeks or months leading to my back going out? Was I in a time of high stress? Was it like when I was younger, was it like right before finals or right after finals? Like I almost like my back would go out almost every Christmas. Like I would finish my
Mm.
huge push in college or my master's program, and then I would go home and something in me would just totally let go, but then also my back would go out. So I think looking at patterns is obviously like a very helpful tool. And then the other side of that is what in meditation or this work as well, we would call trying to cultivate peripheral awareness. And the difference between a grasp is like a very, something is like very tight and very grasped, focused at the center. And I don't mean that that's very conscious for people, but again, we all are kind of in that state. And then starting to, whether it's through meditation or yoga or other practice, like starting to learn how to be a little bit more peripheral sometimes. And that is a total long-term training. Like that isn't going to provide immediate relief for sure, but it's going to start to train me as someone who's very grasped. I also have a lot of fire in my astrological charts. But
Mm.
like this starting to like go through life a little bit softer, a little bit more peripheral, a little bit gentler. And that can, again, as a long-term solution, it can be like a way of using a model of consciousness. So a model of consciousness being, okay, we're either grasp and focus at the center or we're peripheral. Like being able to do both of things is a really helpful thing to be able to do by choice, essentially. So when
Mhm.
someone's sitting in their chair at work and they feel their whole body tense and their chronic low back pain really inflamed, tools for starting to be like, okay, how can I relax my physical body? How can I let my eyesight, like my physical eyesight, be more peripheral? It's like, okay, seeing out to the edges of the room. Like there's all these somatic practices that help create a little bit more peripherality and a little less grasp in the moment. That was a long answer, but it was a few layers.
Sure. Okay, and tell me if I'm kind of on point or not here, but this concept of grasping, it kind of reminds me of if we're not in the present moment, we are often either thinking about the past, whether that's good or bad, or we are worrying about the future. I would definitely fall into that camp where I feel like I am so often stuck in my head about
Mm.
my perpetual and very long to-do list, right? I feel like I've been hearing if I hear myself saying out loud lately, the thing I've been saying a lot is I feel like my entire existence is one big giant to-do list. And that is like for me that sense of being grasped of I am just constantly thinking about what do I have to accomplish in the next minute, in the next hour, in the next day, and in the next month, and in the next year. And that kind of takes my breath away, right? It kind of gives me this feeling of like, ugh. And as soon as one thing gets off of my plate, two more things get stacked on my plate. And so to to feel like you're drowning, it is that sense of being grasped, I think, too, right? And so what you're saying is the more you can be in the moment and let go and, like, just not be so drowning in the future, your body then can be in a more physically relaxed place, and something like low back pain might actually get a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because there's very obvious levels of our grasping. If we pause and look at them similar to what you're saying, there's some obvious levels. I can relate to everything that you just said about to-do lists and being a very driven person and, having a lot of creative energy and showing up for a lot of people in my life. And so there's obvious reasons, and then just to throw something in that's a little bit outside of the obvious reasons, it's like somewhere as like in our animal bodies, because we share a lot of our physiological, anatomical, and even nervous system levels with animal bodies, we there's there is an inherent survival grasp that we all just basically have. And that one we probably aren't ever going to let go of completely, but it's kind of powerful through whether it's just through like hearing these words and being like, oh, I've never thought of that, or through something like a systematic meditation practice, a systematic regression practice, a systematic like spiritual practice, fill in the blank. There's a lot of avenues, but to start to feel where in our systems we hold some level of really innate grasp, where essentially what's driving all of us all day, every day is survival, trying not to die, trying to work our way up some kind of animalistic ladder of sorts. And again, there's higher modes of all of this, like service and, people wanting to be successful and being really creative. I'm not necessarily pointing to all of that, but underneath all of that, for all of us, there is an innate, pretty deep survival grasp. And so that's interesting on kind of like a philosophical or esoteric level if anyone wants to take it and run to their practitioner or their therapist. And then on the day-to-day level, it's like, yeah, where do we just find ourselves sitting at our computer, my shoulder, like sometimes I'll be like, my shoulders are up to my ears and I'm typing and I'm like breathing heavy. And it's like, dude, this does not call for that level of response,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm. Mm. Yeah, yeah, and those moments where we find ourselves maybe overreacting to something, it really could serve as one of those, check-in points to be like, "Oh, why did I just have that level of response? My life is not being threatened, right?
Yeah.
My survival grasp is not the one that's happening right now."
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of how do you, as a practitioner, help someone to have some kind of transformational healing without trying to force it?
Mm. Yeah, that is, uh, as a practitioner, it's a really beautiful, journey to walk with someone as someone who's received a lot of, who's received a lot of modalities as a client. it's such a important mindset for me. It's like I always want everything to be faster and more efficient. I'm like, why isn't my healing going faster? Why isn't this changing more rapidly? And so that I think there's probably a couple of levels. And I know in my experience with you as a practitioner, this happens, which is setting some kind of a space or a container, whether it's a one-on-one space or a group container, for there to be just some initial, like, slowing down, changing the pace, letting there be space for someone to kind of enter parts of ourselves that are maybe not as, like, mentally intelligent, but that are deeply wise, deeply have a sense of deep knowing. That's one aspect of it, I feel like always, is the container. Um, and then there's, there's a certain line of that I use in this specific form of regression therapy, which is dialogue and questions, and that's really common across different modalities, obviously, but questions that try to surpass, or that in a partnership of working with someone inside of a session, for example, questions that I hope that someone's ordinary mind doesn't try to answer, or that we can slightly and slowly start to get below the surface of some of those, really conditioned levels, and start to let other deeper levels respond to questions. And that's really an art, I think. It's part of it is making sure that when we first start, someone goes into a mindful state or moves into that inner space. The inner space techniques moves into that inner space so that they're in a different state of mind or a different state of consciousness, so that other parts of them start to respond. And then I think another thing is holding, as a practitioner, I'm sure you do this all the time, which is the art of, someone usually comes to us as practitioners with a very specific question, challenge, or, like, thing that they want to work on. And it's like how to hold that really, sacredly and important in the space, while also not being super attached or too attached to outcomes, in a way that, like, other possibilities and other spontaneous things can arise that might have a lot of deep meaning or a lot of transformative impact. And it might be nonlinear. Like, someone might come to 4 to 6 sessions to work on a very specific, like, behavior change that they haven't gotten traction around. And we might go through a very, like, winding process over those 4 to 6 sessions. But ultimately, it's like, as a practitioner, I'm still holding that intent, desire, longing that the person came with. And hopefully by the end of those sessions, we've at least woven something of coherence together, that both answers their initial question or longing, and then also maybe some other really cool things or magical things have also unfolded.
Yeah. Okay, that was a lot, and I was tracking you. I was tracking you the whole time. I think it speaks to, again, going this back to this idea of people sometimes will come in with an agenda, and maybe their body's own wisdom has a different agenda that comes up and shows up in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And
Mm.
that's, I mean, I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts of this, your initial question that I kind of went on a tangent about, maybe, but the the not forcing is such a, in some ways it's very subtle. It's like we all are sort of like, yeah, I get it. And then on another level, when there's something that feels kind of dire or important in our lives, it's really easy to be like, but I want this, I need this to change. And that's just kind of running in the background, let's say. And so to see the wisdom of the body rise up, let's say, or the somatic wisdom or some deeper part of someone kind of rise up and be like, but this other thing is more important, or, like, this is the roundabout way to get to this other thing. I mean, that's so beautiful. I think that can sometimes be seen as a roadblock. Probably not. I think most people really, like, honor and respect those things, but it really is almost like the breadcrumb. Like, that's kind of the point.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And, you know, as somebody who does a lot of acupuncture and hands-on work, you know, after 20 years of that, it is no longer shocking or surprising to me when all of a sudden somebody bursts into tears as soon as I touch a part of their spine or I insert a needle into the heart point in the inner ear and all of a sudden they burst out crying. Like these things are, and it's, you know, it surprises people. Sometimes when that's their reaction. Doesn't surprise me anymore, but, and sometimes it surprises people that they're holding onto emotion, in the way that they are.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't live in a culture either that is particularly welcoming all the time of emotion and or, really like a depth of feeling. Like there always has to be a reason why we're crying. And it's like sometimes life moves me so deeply that it's just like tears come, it's not attached to a specific moment or event or memory. I don't need to like process it with anybody. It's just like feeling deeply moved. And I think, yeah, in the West in particular, in the US in particular, at least in like the part of the world that I grew up in, it's like those things don't make sense to people or there's not a lot of space for that kind of expression all the time. But it's a really beautiful part of life, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I mean, I cried during the Super Bowl commercial with the Budweiser Stallion and the Eagle baby, and I'm like, "It's allergies, I just have allergies."
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, boy, yeah. Um, anyway, well, the other thing that you do is you teach yoga, and coming from, you know, I would say my background when I've been doing yoga is more of this like hot yoga, sweat it out. Everybody does the same pose and holds it for the same time. And it's very kind of militant. And that's been my 20 years experience of doing hot yoga. And so when I came down to Pranamaya Resort for the retreat that you were teaching the yoga and doing the somatic body work at, um, well, my logical brain was like, "What? We have to do yoga twice a day? Like, that's" and seriously, I'm like, "What? I have to do yoga twice a day?" And then, obviously, I found myself looking forward to it very quickly and, like, realizing, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing to be able to do yoga twice a day." But what it's so funny how my brain is just like it gets locked into these mindsets, and to go to your class and for you to be like, okay, move your body around in a circle, and when you get to a point where your body says, ooh, that feel like I want to spend more time there than hang out there, I'm like, really? Like I can do something different from the person next to me? Like that's okay to do? I mean, it was funny how many like kind of mindsets I like. It just like the whole week I was realizing how rigid my thinking had become when it
Mm.
came to yoga, and you made it fun, and you made me like get out of my mind and get into my body in a way that was just so needed. You know, people often talk about yin and yang and this idea of like yin yoga, but it was more about like just, hey, like yoga doesn't have to be this rigid routine that everybody's
Mm.
doing together and it's identical and it looks the same. It's like, no, this can be a very somatic experience that is relaxing. And the point is not to sweat 10 pounds out while you're doing it. Although down there when the sun's beating on you, you're sweating a little bit. But I absolutely love your yoga classes. I love your teaching. I love your style. Where did you where did you get your inspiration from? Because what you do is just so different from what I've been used to, and I love it.
Yay. I love that you love it. That's great, great news. And yeah, huge compliment. I have done a number of yoga teacher trainings over the last 15 years that have been beautiful. So it's a weaving of a lot of things and a lot of, teachers and mentors that I feel like have informed that. And then the regression work that I do now for the last 5 years is definitely the most recent. But before that, I was doing a lot of I had been a clinical somatic educator for a number of years. That was kind of one of my big trainings that I did further further along ago. And I would say that the somatic, philosophies, the somatic experiencing, the somatic based practices moved from being something that I did just one-on-one in what used to be more like coaching sessions with people, less therapeutic. But at that time, that I feel like is at the heart of yoga for me these days, both in my personal practice, although I totally go to hot yoga still, and I love yoga, the yoga asana of the yogic tradition is a deep physical training. Like, it's hard. That is a part of it. It's a will engagement into
Mm.
creating the physical body as a way for higher states of consciousness to land. So I love that side of things. And then also in this line of the somatic experiencing or following felt sense, it's like that invitation for people to enter different parts of themselves and to let the body, the physical body, the muscles, the ligaments, the connective tissue to kind of highlight either what's stuck or what feels really good or just what wants or needs a couple, like you said, a couple rounds of breath. Like, you can just stay in this shape that it doesn't have a name. That's usually also the way I lead. It's like, I'm not going to prescribe every single pose by name. It's like, you're going to find something that feels good or necessary in your body, and then, pause there. It's going to look different than your neighbor. So that, that felt sense, or that like following inside experiences, feels like it's really moved to the heart of how I teach groups.
Yeah. Well, I love it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of where you are, what you're doing, where you're teaching, where people can find you?
Yes. So I live and work most of the year in Northern California at a meditation retreat center outside of a little town called Ravendale, which most people aren't going to know, but we do offer courses there. We have a few public courses and then some courses for students who have been a part of the school for a long time. I spend the other part of the year in Bend, Oregon, which is where Dr. Ayla and I originally met, probably over 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And my family's here. So when I'm here, I offer workshops and classes and things. And then where Ayla and I have recently reconnected is at Pranamaya Island Resort in Placencia, Belize. And so I partner with the founder of a luxury wellness retreat company. Her name is Dr. Mara Kevin. It's actually really hard to describe Pranamaya in different podcasting conversations that I have with
Mhm.
people. It's, think of luxury meets like wellness meets grounding and being barefoot for a week meets like beautiful, clean, food is medicine, meets all the things.
Yeah. There is something really awesome about wandering around a luxury resort barefoot for a week that is irreplaceable.
I know. One of the things I specifically point out is like, because the restaurant is open air, meaning like it's covered, but
Mm,
it's open. And
mhm.
because probably culturally, it's obviously just a different place, like in Central America and on this private island, you can even be barefoot in the restaurant. Like, some part of me, this like
Right,
kid
yeah.
growing up of like no
The
shirt, no shoes, no service
no
signs.
service, yep, yep.
It's like, I can be, one, in my bathing suit if I want to, and two, I can be barefoot in the restaurant and the bar.
Yeah. Yes. No, I had that exact same, again, mindset, like, shift where it's like, "Oh, I can actually wander around barefoot even in the restaurant? That's okay? Oh my gosh, how exciting." Yeah, amazing. And then you had a gift for us. You, were going to do a bit of a somatic experience here if,
Mm,
you still have time.
yes. Yeah, let's do a practice. So, um this one is one that goes back to my early days of like discovering that I have more than a physical body.
Mm, okay.
It is a very simple practice and it might be familiar to some people, but I love it and it has a special place in my heart. So, if you're not driving listening to this podcast, can close your eyes. If you're driving, you can just have, gentle awareness and listen to my voice. And just taking your hands and rubbing them together, creating a little bit of friction. We're starting to, we'll do this for a few more seconds, but you're just bringing your awareness to the palms of the hands, the heat that's building there, the sensation of the friction. And then just slowly letting the palms come to pause, and they're just together in front of the chest or the belly, not a particular place anywhere that's comfortable. And slowly start to move the hands apart, really slowly. And you're just keeping your awareness, your attention in this space between the palms. And sometimes I describe it as you can either open the palms really slowly, or you can kind of open and close the palms almost like you're playing with imaginary taffy. There's almost like, if you want to, you could find a gentle pulsing motion. And the invitation, or not that you're looking for something super specific, but this invitation to feel some level of the energy between the palms. It might feel like vibration, tingling. Sometimes it's a feeling almost like of opposing magnets in the palms. And your hands can be as close together as you want or need, or as far apart as you want or need, but it's just following these qualities or sensations that are non-physical, but that feel very close to physical, or that are registering in the palms, even though what we're playing with is a sense of the energy between the hands. And it might come and go as well. It might be like you feel it for a second and then you kind of lose it. You have to bring the palms closer together to reignite the sensation, and then you'll re-find it again. And just any reflection, if it makes sense, if it's relevant, just a sense of like what either awakens in you through this experience, what becomes enlivened, if anything. And then you can slowly start to bring your palms together and maybe move slower than you usually might go, because you can, as you close the palms, you'll kind of feel the pressure, the density between the hands as you close them back together. And then once the palms are together, s- take the hands, one hand on the heart and one hand on the belly, and maybe on your chest, depending on how your clothing is. See if you can come into contact maybe with your skin, because the palm might be quite warm, or a bit warmer than it was before. And when you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can gently start to open them and bring your hands back to your lap or wherever you would like them to sit. That's a very simple practice of feeling the etheric body or our prana or our chi, which I love.
Yeah, we have, done that a lot over the years in different qigong classes. That's often part of the warm up.
Yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing uh, what I thought was a fabulous conversation about thinking about our physical symptoms in a little bit different light. And that there is so much more mystery to our human bodies and everything we experience than I think we often acknowledge in our day to day world.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me and for the beautiful impacts that you create. I mean, that was kind of a pun, unintended, but that you create through sharing this podcast and your recent book. It's so cool to see you just
Oh,
soaring as a practitioner and a published author and podcast host. And yeah, it's really beautiful.
thank you. Yeah, this definitely 10 years ago, this was not on my radar that I'd be doing this. And so life has its amazing twists and turns.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome, Bree. Well, thank you so much. I will put all your contact info in the show notes so people know where to find you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.